Welcome to the 80-20 Baseball Podcast. Strike! The 80-20 Coaching Masterclass, our weekly get-together where coaches go from new to good and good to great. Mastering the fundamentals and the art of coaching.
Welcome everyone to this week's Get Together. Coach Bo here. We are on phase number 5 this week, the swing. We are going to talk about some universal ways that hitters can be better and be great. Also, I'm going to share with you a hitting drill that you can quickly implement with your team or a group of players. We're going to talk a little Tony Gwynn. And lastly, I'll share a tip for all of you that are taking your kid to a hitting coach or are considering taking your kid, your players to a hitting coach. I'll share a universal tip. Speaking of hitting coaches, this past week, I reached out to a couple really good hitting coaches, and both of them said they'd come on the podcast. So those interviews, those discussions are on the books. They are set to be recorded over the next couple weeks. Super pumped about that. Perfect timing, coming off our 5 phases of hitting series. And in April, I have another great guest. Not necessarily a hitting coach, but somebody who is very well known in the youth baseball community. And that is set to be recorded in April. This is a really busy coach, and like I said, very well known with a wonderful message. So I'm super pumped for all 3 interviews. I'm working on a 4th interview with another hitting coach who talks about the mental game of hitting. So it's lining up really nicely here. For those of you that might be a little new to this podcast, it's a little different in that we go between solo podcast episodes and those interview style podcast episodes. I think it's a really good way to add in variety while also maintaining a consistent message. And a consistent message is something that we can take out, practice in and practice out, game in and game out, and implement. We have a clear understanding of what we're trying to do when we go out there with the information. So I do think it's important that the information is cohesive. And even though we're adding in variety, it aligns with the fundamental principles that we want to align with to be great coaches and get our players and teams better at the game of baseball. So pumped up about those upcoming interviews. And more than anything, I'm pumped to bring these people on, these great coaches on, to share out their wisdom with all of you, the great listeners of the 80-20 Baseball Podcast. Speaking of listeners, I got an email from a coaching coordinator just the other day with a lot of praise about the 80-20 baseball ways of going about coaching. He was looking at the coaching plan, throwing routine, the baseball specific warm-up, the strength routine. And again, this is a coaching coordinator for a league. And it pumped me up to hear that he could see exactly where we're coming from, where I'm coming from when I build out and create all this stuff, especially the coaching plan. And speaking of the coaching plan, we are having our annual March spring promo discount code, Great Coaching. Great Coaching. If you use that promo code, you'll get 10% off. If you miss it, it's not going to be discounted for a minimum of 5 or 6 months. So for the month of March, use Great Coaching promo code, and it's already an unbeatable price, but now you're getting better than unbeatable. Now, I had a coach ask me, Coach, can I find this stuff, all the coaching stuff I need, all scattered around the internet? Well, it's going to be that. It's going to be scattered around. You're going to have to figure out which is the best drill or the best drills. You're going to have to do a lot of work searching and compiling, organizing, and prioritizing. With the coaching plan, you don't need to do that. It's all hubbed through 80-20 Baseball. Quick login, boom. You have access to everything this season, next season, over the summer, next Tuesday, whenever you need it. Late at night, boom, it's right there. It's hubbed on 8020baseball.com, so you don't need to store it on your computer and have all these different files. You can if you want, but you don't have to. And everything is aligned. It is the fastest and easiest way to get your hands on great coaching material in an organized, easy-to-use fashion. Almost all of you great listeners are really only going to have one smaller-ish window of time to be a coach. You have a tight window with your kids, players. Now you don't need to go out there and guess. You don't need to figure out if what you're doing is great. You don't have to spend a bunch of extra time going and collecting all of the information that's scattered and spread out throughout the internet. You go to 8020baseball.com, put in the promo Great Coaching, click buy. You get an email, you log in. There you go. It's all right there for you. And nothing feels better than going out to the field, confident knowing that your plan is going to work, that your coaching plan is going to work. That's the best feeling. The worst feeling is going out to the field, not sure if what you're going to do is going to work, or if your drill is good, or your drills are good, or your throwing routine that you're putting in is any good. The 80/20 baseball coaching plan has gotten results with coaches all over the country and even outside the country at a variety of different ages. Just out of high school varsity, coached by it recently, and it's a great fit for that 8U, 9U through the 14U level. Although, if I was having a conversation with an MLB or college coach tomorrow, I'd say, hey, I got a bunch of drills in there you should be using. But that said, it's designed specifically for youth baseball, which I think in and of itself makes it a lot different. The drills are all unique to 80/20 baseball. I didn't take a drill from somebody else and just plug it in. Each drill is unique, one of a kind. So 8020baseball.com has all that. Now, the 5 phases of hitting. The swing is phase 5. This is a challenging one to discuss on a podcast inherently because players are going to have different types of swings. It's like the pitching delivery. There is uniqueness here. For example, in the pre-at-bat or pre-pitch routine, I think every single player should have a breathing routine, one big breath in and out. That should just be universal. But when it comes to the swing, there's going to be some variations. I think fewer variations than a lot of us might think because physics are physics. Physics is not art. You can't be that creative with physics. There are hard and fast rules all throughout physics and physiology, etc. But there definitely are variations to player swings. And that's okay. But there are some what I would call absolutes. Now, real quick before I talk about that, last week in phase 4, when we discussed swing decision, I mentioned that it's very important to coach up swing decisions often in practice. Swing decisions and feedback on a player's swing decision should be given early and often. We should give consistent feedback during practice, during batting practice, during hitting drills. That said, I would be very cautious to coach this up too much during the game. We should not be coaching the same way during practice as we are during the games. In fact, it should look very different. We should be very much involved, moving around, creating a great environment during practices, giving that timely, calculated feedback, looking to optimize. Practice should be hard work for a coach that wants to be great. The good thing is, all of you are tough. Most of you grew up drinking hose water like I did, grew up in the 80s and 90s. You're not wimps. So going out there and working a youth baseball practice for 90 minutes or 2 hours, y'all got that. And it will be rewarding. It will yield rewarding results. The game should be way more about the players. We should be heard way less as a coach during the game than we are at practice. We should be seen less during the game than we are at practice if we're doing things right during practices. So swing decision last week was phase 4, and I want to bring this back around to mention something, to clarify something. During practices, I think we should be giving consistent feedback if a player makes a good swing decision or not. It doesn't need to be more than 2 to 3 words like we talked about last week. But during the game, we should limit this to almost nothing. One thing I like to do during a game is the occasional head nod, like the affirmative head nod to a hitter that looks over to me in the third base box or over to me at the dugout. Maybe they're stepping out between pitches. Maybe they're looking for approval on a pitch they took, a pitcher's pitch. That gets called a strike, but they felt wasn't in their hitting zone with less than 2 strikes. It was 2 inches off the plate, at the knees, down and away. It was a good pitch for the pitcher, but not such a good pitch for the hitter. This is the time I really like to affirm with a nice solid head nod, with a nice yes, good decision on taking that. Giving that player affirmation that they made the right decision there without having to say anything, without even having to draw attention to ourselves. The hitter sees you give them a nice head nod, like, yes, good take. Half smile head nod, confident head nod. They know, all right, coach knows I took that pitch because it wasn't a pitch I should have swung at with less than 2 strikes. All right, phase 5, the swing. There are essentially 3 types of swing intensities. So we're going to talk about a universal point to coach up our hitters on here. Essentially, there are 3 different types of swingers when it comes to swing intensity. We have the overswinger, swing for the fences. Number 2, we have the overprotector, would rather just foul off pitches, not really looking to do anything with the ball. They're not looking to hit line drives. They're just overprotective. So you have the overswinger and you have the overprotector. We don't want our hitters to be either of those. The overswinger is going to swing and miss a lot. They're going for broke. They're swinging for the fences. This is not a good approach. They're going to hit some balls pretty far from time to time, but their consistent run production is going to be very low. The overprotector is going up there and trying to avoid the strikeout. We never want our hitters going up there and avoiding a strikeout. If they have the mindset to avoid a strikeout, it's like the prevent defense in football. We all know that's not the optimal way. Sure, with 2 strikes, you got to adjust, you got to protect a little, but you're not trying to avoid the strikeout. Here's what happens when you try to avoid a strikeout. The pitchers make mistakes. Pitchers make a lot of mistakes. And when they make those mistakes, if we are in avoid the strikeout mode or overprotector, the best thing we're going to do is maybe hit a hard ground ball to second base, maybe a blooper into the outfield. We're doing these half quick swings just to make contact. It's really hard to hit line drives like that. It's really hard to hit line drives. And the name of the game is to swing at the right pitches, take the walks when the pitcher gives them to you, and hit a bunch of line drives. So we don't want the overswinger swinging for the fences. That's not good. We don't want the overprotector. We want the hitter that optimizes and balances both consistent contact with hard contact. They're okay with the occasional swing and miss, but they never overswing. They're looking to hit hard line drives. Somebody who balances consistent contact with consistent line drives. They don't overswing and they're not up there overprotecting. The next thing we want to talk about when it comes to the swing, a universal thing. The best hitters universally have very small movements. It's a streamlined kinematic sequencing from start to finish. It's streamlined. It's efficient. If your hitter has a huge load, we got to get rid of that. If hitters start their swing by moving their hands up or down instead of straight to contact, we want to get rid of that. We want as little extra movement as possible, straight from the load to the ball. We want our hitter swings to be as straight as possible from the load to the ball. Now, here's a drill that you can do to practice this. We can talk until the cows come home with our players, or we can set them up in training environments that force them to do what we want. Here's a drill that can easily be implemented and set up the training environment to force quick to the ball, solid contact. Very simple drill here. You get 3 or 4 tees. Hopefully you have at least 3 tees for batting practice, at a minimum 2 tees. Ideally, every team has 3 hitting tees. While tees do have their flaws, and I think they can be overappreciated by some, they do have value. And in this particular case, they're necessary for this drill. By the way, in the coaching plan, I have my best tee drill that I've seen nowhere else really improves players' ability to hit with 2 strikes. It's specifically a 2-strike tee drill, and that's in the coaching plan. So let's say you have 3 hitters. You line up 3 hitters, space them out enough so there's no safety issues. They each have a tee. They put the ball in the tee. They get to their load position. When you say ready, set, they get to their load position. So they're to their load position. Now, I want to say this. I'm not a big fan of stopping and starting and turning things like the pitching delivery and the swing into different steps like robotic. I'm not a big fan of like the pitching delivery drill where they say, all right, go here, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and you like hold it at every spot. It's not athletic. That's not how pitchers pitch, and it's not how hitters swing. Swings are fluid. They're not herky-jerky. They're not stop and start. You don't stop and start at each spot. Once the load starts, there's like a nice, smooth rhythm to it. That said, for this drill, I think it's okay because this isn't a drill you're doing all the time. You say ready, set, your 3 hitters or 4 hitters or however many tees you have, they get to that loaded position, and just long enough for them to get there while adding a little randomness to when you say go or hit. I like the word hit. Ready, set, hit. They're going to go from their load position, and you are having a competition with those 3 players or those 4 players or those 2 players. There's a competition to see who can make contact with the ball first. This forces them to be quick to the ball. It forces them to be fast and direct to the ball. Swing straight but slow, so they have to be quick and straight. It forces them to be quick to the ball. They're going to quickly feel those extra movements because when you put a little pressure to swing quick to the ball, they're going to feel that extra little dip of their hands or the extra little thing they do, the extra little hitch they do, or whatever it is. They're going to feel that more than if they weren't being forced to swing quick and go, wow, okay, I just got whooped by my teammates. Now, the contact of the ball will happen pretty quick for each player. So you got to be watching this closely to see who wins the drill or wins that rep. You could have them do 10 reps of this, and I guarantee this is going to get them thinking swing fast and efficient to the ball, straight to the ball, less movement. Now, the reason I have them start from their loaded position is because each hitter's load will vary with timing, and we don't want to mess with that too much. We don't want to mess with the load too much because some hitters load a little faster, some load a little later. But that's something we want to keep in mind. So that's a drill to speed up those players. Maybe you have 3 or 4 players that have long swings or hitches in their swings, or they have extra movements with their hands or their arms with their swing. I would take those players and do that drill with them. And it wouldn't hurt to do it with all your players. Now, one more universal tip. We want our hitters to keep their eyes as level as possible when they're swinging. They are trying to track a small baseball coming at them at a certain speed, and as they get older, pretty fast. Once they get to a certain level, they're picking up different pitches, curveballs, changeups, fastballs, locations. It is, of course, imperative that our hitters see the ball very well. If the head is bobbing up and down or the head and the eyes are moving a lot, especially through their swing when it's most important, that is not a good thing. We want them, as they're swinging, to keep their eyes as level and as still as possible so they can see the ball clearly. One thing that happens with hitters at the youth level, some of them take big, aggressive, big strides, big leg movements, and their head bounces around. It drops. A lot of times you'll see a dip. They take this big stride and their head dips down. This is not good for hitting. If you ever played receiver or tight end in football or just out at the park, flag football or just a turkey bowl or whatever, when you are running a route, you can be as herky-jerky as you want when you're running a route in football. But when that ball is in the air and you're tracking it as the receiver or as the tight end or the running back out in the flat, if you are tracking that ball in the air, the best receivers, tight ends, running backs at this, the best will smooth out their stride to keep their eyes from bouncing, to keep their head from bouncing. So you smooth out your stride as a receiver, just like a hitter should smooth out their lower half, should smooth out their eye level. All right, that doesn't mean their head's not going to move during the swing, but their eyes should not bounce around. They shouldn't drop down. So that's something that's really important. This typically happens when hitters go from a position where they're standing up a little taller and then they stride out too far or they extend their stride out. You'll see their head drop, and we want to stay away from that if we can. All right, let's finish with this. There's a lot of you that were big fans probably of Tony Gwynn growing up. A lot of you are my age, and growing up, Tony Gwynn was considered like the best hitter or one of the best hitters, right? It was unanimous. Tony Gwynn is a great hitter. And Tony Gwynn was a great hitter, no doubt about it. Tony Gwynn was a great hitter. Now, I've said on this podcast that I think Tony Gwynn, based off of facts, like a stat called weighted runs created plus, it sounds sophisticated, but all it is how many runs did they create? How many runs did they create? That's it. Not batting average, which has 2 massive flaws. We talked about that last week. So Tony Gwynn, of course, always led the league in batting average, or was always at the top. So we considered him the best hitter in the league, or one of the best. But we have to acknowledge the fact that there are 2 massive flaws with batting average. The biggest one is walks don't count. It doesn't matter if you walk. But also, it counts all hits the same. It counts all hits the same. 2 massive flaws with the stat batting average. Weighted runs created plus. Takes everything and puts it all aside and says, how many runs did this player create for their team? What hitting an offense is about. Scoring runs. It's not about base hits. It's not even about walks. It's not even about line drives. Sure, those add up and those are important pieces, but that's not the stat. The main stat. Now, why am I talking about this? I think Tony Gwynn erred a little bit on the side of protectionism, erred on the side of protectionist. There is so much to learn and use from Tony Gwynn, but I do think he erred on the side of making contact, specifically with less than 2 strikes, than he did with trying to drive the ball. Now, I would take a Tony Gwynn over 95% of the rest of the hitters in the league at his time. No doubt about it. But what if I were to tell you these 3 guys who played over the last 30 years created more runs, and one of them substantially more runs than Tony Gwynn? These guys helped score more runs for their team. These 3 players helped their team score more runs than Tony Gwynn did. And this isn't a total. This is a rate. So weighted runs created plus is a rate. It's not a total, which wouldn't be fair because they all had different amount of at-bats and different amount of games, different amount of seasons. What if I were to tell you Brian Giles played for Cleveland, Pittsburgh, San Diego? Brian Giles had a weighted runs created plus of 136. Tony Gwynn, 132. Brian Giles, who played at the same time as Tony Gwynn, might have been his teammate on San Diego. I'll have to check that. Created more runs per game than Tony Gwynn. Remember, runs is the name of the game. I understand the substats and the process behind it. I know the process is more important than the results, but if we're going to assess a process, we have to use the key result. The result we should use to drive and guide every single hitting process is runs created. That's it. The only thing that matters in baseball at the end of the day are the runs created. That should be used to drive and assess our process. Again, I definitely think our players should be focused on the process way more than scoring runs or the stat runs created plus, but hopefully you understand where I'm coming from. Brian Giles created more runs for his team than Tony Gwynn. I bet there's a handful of you on here that probably don't know who Brian Giles is. I probably wouldn't know if I wasn't such an avid baseball person. Brian Giles created more runs for his team, and he had a long career. I didn't just grab anybody that played 2 or 3 seasons. Brian Giles played 14 or 15 years. 0.73 runs created per game. Gwynn was 0.65. Here's 2 more. Joey Votto. Joey Votto created substantially more runs than Tony Gwynn. If we were to ask 100 people that are in their 40s who was a better hitter, Tony Gwynn or Joey Votto, I wouldn't be surprised if the vast majority of them said Tony Gwynn. But what is being a good hitter? Helping your team score more runs. Runs is the stat that really matters. Joey Votto had a weighted runs created plus, essentially his run creation rate of 148. 100 is essentially league average. 148. So he was 48% higher than league average on runs created plus. I don't want to dive too much into the stat, but you gotta trust me on this. It is the gold standard stat for runs created. 148 for Joey Votto. Tony Gwynn, 132. Now, Tony Gwynn was still 32% higher than the league average when it came to creating runs for his team, but 48% is a lot better than 32% above average. Joey Votto, would we consider him a better hitter? Dude played like 16 or 17 years. He wasn't a one-hit wonder. How about Carlos Delgado? Del got it. How many of you remember that from SportsCenter? Carlos Del got it. Carlos Delgado played 14 or 15 years, and his weighted runs created plus was 135. Tony Gwynn, 132. Of course, we would take Tony Gwynn over 95% of hitters in the league, or 97%, a ridiculously high number. But I'm trying to illustrate that while we grew up thinking Tony Gwynn was the greatest hitter of our generation, there's 3 players that are definitely not considered the greatest hitter of our generation. Yet they all created more runs for their team over careers that lasted a long time. So this goes back to my overswinger, overprotector, and the optimal swing intensities or intent. I think Tony Gwynn, he probably should have let loose a little bit more with less than 2 strikes because, of course, Tony Gwynn could hit. I think he would have done better in run production had he let loose a little bit more with less than 2 strikes and really think just ripping doubles more. Doubles are substantially better for a team's offensive run creation than a single. Tony Gwynn, great hitter, huge fan of Tony Gwynn. I just wanted to illustrate that Tony Gwynn was elite, but I think he left a lot of run production on the table. I've seen him take batting practice live, and he would rip home runs like no problem. Now, I'm not saying they should have started swinging for the fences, but I think somewhere in the middle, Tony Gwynn, could have hit a lot more doubles in his career. He hit a lot of doubles, but I think Tony Gwynn could have hit more doubles than anybody in the history of baseball. Tony Gwynn was 37 in doubles hit in his career. But I truly think Tony Gwynn could have been at the top of that list. Tony Gwynn had 543 doubles in his career. Tris Speaker, 792. The next is Pete Rose at 746. So essentially 200 more doubles. I firmly believe Tony Gwynn could have gone from about 550 doubles to 750 and been in the top 2 of all time, if not the top of all time in doubles, if he would have just taken off the governor a little bit more. Now, you're going, well, Coach, isn't it great what he did? Yeah, it was. He was amazing. I think he could have been slightly better. He's a Long Beach guy like I am with the Long Beach Poly High School. I taught a summer school at Long Beach Poly High School. My first game ever coaching as a head coach was at Long Beach Poly High School. I've followed Tony Gwynn for a lot of years. He was obviously in San Diego. I grew up in SoCal. Nothing but respect. But what I'm trying to illustrate here is maybe we should look at Joey Votto's hitting approach and maybe try to infuse that a little bit more so into our kids than Tony Gwynn. Joey Votto helped his team create 16% more runs. That's a huge number, especially over the course of a season. And lastly, I'll say this. I think Tony Gwynn's 2-strike approach is something I'd be much more apt to want to copy and borrow from than his less than 2-strike approach. That's really where I think he left a lot of the doubles on the table. With 2 strikes, I don't think I would have changed much, if any, of what Tony Gwynn did. I mean, he might have been probably the best 2-strike approach of any hitter in my lifetime. What I'm saying is, and I hope you all appreciate the difference here, the nuance, what I'm talking about here is with less than 2 strikes, I think he left runs on the table, all right? So let's be careful with less than 2 strikes, having our kids go up there and get defensive, looking to foul off pitches, putting the governor on them, being content with putting the ball in play. We don't want that. We want kids thinking hard line drives. Hard line drives will turn into doubles, not overswinging, but hitting hard line drives with less than 2 strikes. Those will turn into doubles, the occasional home run, and overall will create more runs for the team and fewer outs. All right. Hopefully you appreciate that I'm coming on here and not trying to just regurgitate everything else that's said out there. Why would I have a podcast that just regurgitates and is a carbon copy of all the other stuff in the baseball community? We're trying to look at it and optimize everything that's out there. We're trying to learn from everybody who's come before us and be even better. We want to stand on their shoulders, not look eye to eye. There's been such great wisdom that's come before us, but we can build upon it. Just like in any industry or any area of life, we should be building upon the knowledge that came before us, not just being content and saying, yeah, it must be right. Speaking of that, if you want to improve your kid, I think taking them to a hitting coach is not a bad idea, but I think it's important to go in with a plan, be clear about the plan with a hitting coach. And one thing to keep an eye on, that's a red flag. It's the biggest red flag when it comes to hitting coaches, in my opinion. Assuming they're not bad people. If they're bad people, of course, that would be the biggest red flag. You shouldn't even take your kid to them. All right. Assuming that they're good people, they're well-intentioned, the biggest red flag that I see with hitting coaches, same with pitching, if they don't assess the lower half at all. If they're not keeping an eye on the lower half, the legs, the feet, the base, the hips, and even up through the torso angle. If you take your kid to a hitting coach and they're fixated on the hands, the arms, the bat, even the head to a certain extent, that is a big red flag. Fundamentally, the kinetic chain, the kinematic sequencing starts at the ground. Ground force production. A swing starts with contact with the ground. Typically that front lead leg. For a righty, it's the left leg. For a lefty, it's the right leg. A lot of hitters, when they swing, only have one leg solidly touching the ground. Same with pitching. When pitchers release the ball, most pitchers, that back leg is just slightly touching the ground. All right. Then they're using that post leg, that lead leg, to stabilize off the ground to create ground force production up through the kinetic chain, the kinematic sequencing, which ends at ball release for pitchers and ball contact for the hitter. A lot of times we see things that are wrong with the hands, the arms, or the bat with a hitter. A lot of times those are symptoms of something that was wrong or something that went amiss or a flaw earlier in the swing. So keep that in mind when you take your kid to a hitting coach or a pitching coach. In this case, we're talking hitting. If they're not looking at the legs, looking at the feet, assessing the base from time to time at a minimum, that's a big red flag. It usually shows inexperience or, unfortunately, a lack of understanding of the kinetic chain, things like that. Now, I'm not saying if they adjust the hands or the swing up top, that means they don't know what they're doing. What I'm saying is if they spend no time looking at the base, the feet, or they just go right into fixing the hands and the shoulders and things, and that's all they are fixated on, the upper half, that's a red flag. All right, there should be some balance there. Of course, there's going to be flaws with the arms and the hands and maybe even the grip of the bat and things like that, and the elbows and the angles of the elbows and the torso posture. There will be some errors there that need to be adjusted and fixed. But if they never look down, you never get the sense they're assessing or trying to improve or at least analyze the lower half, that's a big red flag. All right, everybody, this has been awesome being here with all of you. Great coaching. Use that promo code to get the discount on the coaching plan. It's going to be another 5 or 6 months before there's a discount on the coaching plan. Great coaching, all one word. Great coaching, all one word. Use that to get the discount on the coaching plan. The coaching plan is different than the new coaching bundle on 80/20 Baseball, just to be clear. So you can get that right now at 8020baseball.com. And until next week, let's take care of our health so we can be at our best for our families, our close friends, for our players, our team. Let's take this information, go out there, put it into play. Don't let it just sit up there between your ears or on some notepad somewhere. All right, y'all, take care. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80/20 Baseball Podcast, the 80/20 Baseball Masterclass. We got this. Now, let's take the field.